This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here he is, the host of the podcast, AWR Hawkins.
Welcome to Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart News podcast focused on guns, gun rights, the Second Amendment. You know, we sum these things up here each week under the banner of freedom, and we'll always do that, and we do it this week, and that's because an armed citizen is a free citizen. Simple as that. Look, folks, have a couple of shout-outs. My buddy Mowbray reached out to me, sent me a photo. He and his father, his daughter out shooting. You know, 3 generations of people enjoying the Second Amendment. It was phenomenal. One of the guns was a commonly owned semi-automatic firearm. Looked like an AR-15. I love AR-15s, to be honest with you. It's one of the greatest guns ever made. I know I've said it before, but if our country ever breaks its politically correct shackles, if we break free from them, we'll teach our kids in school, along with Henry Ford's mass production line and all of these things that rightfully get attention as American ingenuity. We'll also teach them about the ingenuity behind the AR-15 rifles, because the AR-15 rifle is a piece of genius, and it is an American rifle. So anyway, Mowbray, thanks for sending that. Hey, folks, also my buddy Cal picked him up one of those Walther PPS M2s. Folks, that's a heck of a gun. Heck of a gun. That thing is so thin. Concealing it is easy. Now, I carry my Walther PPS M2 in a Klinger holster Stingray. And I've talked to you about that holster before. They describe that holster as a compact holster, and you think, whatever, compact, you know what? It is compact. When you get it, the holster is as small as it could be, right? And it holds the gun securely and without adding any noticeable weight to that firearm. So you take a small weapon like the PPS M2, you put it in that Klinger holster Stingray, and you got all-day comfort for carry. It's just a fact. It's how it is. But my buddy Cal picked him up one. He's going to love it. He's going to love it. Folks, we have us right here a heck of a week as far as news goes, all right? We have an ongoing battle here. I know I described this last week. I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I do want to say we got these red state Democrats. They're still trying to win. And I cannot tell you enough, I cannot stress enough that part of protecting our freedom, part of securing the exercise of freedom, is defeating these people. You know, I had a story this week, Senator Tester, in Montana, the cow assassin. You know, Tester doesn't hunt, you know that. He hasn't had a hunting license for years. We covered that at Breitbart weeks or months ago. Yet he tries to pawn himself off as pro-gun. And this week, his communications director tried to take up for him by saying that Tester shoots a bunch of cows and pigs all the time. Shoots those cows. So he's a cow assassin. Got videos out on the internet of him shooting cows. Folks, I mean, listen, if you own a ranch or a farm, doing that, I'm not putting that down in any way. I'm not mocking that in any way. You know, however you bring those cows in for the slaughter, I know that's part of life on the farm or on the ranch. But here's the deal. That's not what a senator does to protect the Second Amendment. Don't show me videos of you shooting cows. Show me videos of you voting for Kavanaugh. Of you voting for Gorsuch. Neither of which, by the way, or neither of whom Tester supported. Make sure you write that down real quick. If you live in Montana, Tester voted against Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. In other words, he voted with Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat, New York, Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat, California, voted with them to oppose both of Trump's pro-gun Supreme Court nominees. Don't show me videos of you shooting cows, Senator Tester. Show me some proof that you're pro-gun. There is none. There is none. This is a man who supported gun control with Senator Dianne Feinstein. Sure did. Sure did. Wanted to add the no-fly list to background checks. Sure did. Sure did. It's time to vote him out. Vote in Matt Rosendale if you're out there in Montana. You got a hunting economy. You can't have somebody like Tester in charge. You just can't. Folks, down in Florida, Senator Bill Nelson, come on. Senator Nelson makes a mockery of the Second Amendment. He wants to ban whole categories of firearms. And he says things that are just unjustifiably ignorant. Like AR-15s aren't used for hunting. What? AR-15s are one of the most rapidly growing hunting firearm. What is he talking about? See, he's just another Democrat saying what he's got to say to justify his real intention, which is to take your AR-15 away, which is to ban your commonly owned semi-automatic firearms. Folks, look at Tennessee. We got Marsha Blackburn, Republican, running for the vacated Senate seat. When Corker stepped down, Blackburn declared that she'd be running for it. She is pro-gun to the core. If you live in Tennessee, Blackburn is pro-gun, pro-Trump to the core. Got Phil Bredesen running against her, a Democrat. Bredesen tells everybody he's pro-gun. Now, wait for it. Wait for it. Then this week he goes to Manhattan for a fundraiser with Michael Bloomberg. I don't know how far Manhattan is from Tennessee as far as in miles, yards, and feet, but I can tell you this, it's a long way from Tennessee values. A long way. It's forever from Tennessee values. And Phil Bredesen wants to tell us he's pro-gun, but then he wants to go to Bloomberg's Manhattan home where Bloomberg raises money for him. Now, if I were running for office, just a quick question. I'm not and I won't be. But if I were running for office, would Bloomberg raise money for me? He wouldn't even return my phone call. If I called his office to hint at him possibly helping me, he wouldn't even return my phone call. And by him, I mean his secretary, anybody. They wouldn't return my call. Because Bloomberg is only going to work with people who share his commitment to gun control. And the moment Phil Bredesen boarded that plane and left Tennessee to go to Bloomberg's house for a fundraiser, at that moment, the cat was out of the bag. Bredesen is no more pro-gun. He's no more pro-gun than Nancy Pelosi. And speaking of Nancy Pelosi, you know, we did a piece on Breitbart. This is important, folks. These are things you got to remember. You got to share with your neighbors and your coworkers, with your fellow gun owners. Pelosi has a bunch of gun control she's ready to push if the Democrats are able to take control of Congress. Universal background checks, assault weapons ban, armor-piercing ammunition ban. She wants to be sure suppressors aren't deregulated, and by that I mean be sure they're not moved out from under the purview of the National Firearms Act. She wants to be sure there are gun confiscation laws in place. By that I mean gun violence restraining orders. On and on I can go. Will any of these stop mass shootings or high-profile public shootings? No. Maryland has these kind of things, gun violence restraining orders. And on June 28, 2018, what happened? Dude walked into the Capitol Gazette in Annapolis, killed 5 people. Florida has these types of laws. And on August 26, 2018, what happened? A dude in a gun-free zone at the Jacksonville Landing opened fire and killed people. We could go on and on. These laws don't stop people. She started pushing these laws after the Santa Fe high school shooting in Texas, May 18th, 2018. You know, she was doing those crocodile tears and lamenting the fact that President Trump won't support more gun control like gun violence restraining orders. Let me tell you something, folks. If a gun violence restraining order law was on the books in either Texas or if it was on the books federally, it would not have prevented the attack in Santa Fe that she was using as a springboard to push the gun control to begin with. Why? How can I say that with such certainty? I know some of you know. Because the gunman didn't use his own guns. He used somebody else's. The gunman was too young to own guns, too young to buy guns. The gun violence restraining orders would have been powerless over him. And I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it. The only reason I hate to say it is because I've said it so often, but let it soak in. Gun violence restraining orders would have been powerless over him the same way gun-free zones are powerless over every determined attacker. The same way background checks are powerless over determined attackers. The same way high-capacity magazine bans are powerless over determined attackers. Maryland has a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Any of you want to go to Baltimore this Friday night? Just walk around by yourself? Any of you? It's not safe. You know why? Because criminals don't care what laws you pass. I'm only going to say this and I'm going to move on. Tell me a law. Tell me a gun law that would stop someone who is determined to attack a school or a hospital or a movie theater or a workplace. I don't care where it is, but tell me one gun law. Email me, AWR Hawkins at Breitbart.com. Email me. One gun law that would stop an attacker who is determined to attack and die in the attack. Now, some of you who are more moderate politically are going, that's not a fair question. Because no law would stop such a person. So that's not a fair question. You have to ask us about someone who's determined to attack and not die. No, I don't. Because what I'm doing is showing you how silly the push for any gun control is. And I mean it, any gun control. It's silly. Because you cannot stop somebody who plans to shoot up Orlando Pulse, kill 49 people, and then die. You cannot stop somebody who, as a team, husband and wife, plan on shooting up as many people as they can in San Bernardino, December 2nd, 2015, and then dying. You cannot stop somebody who, on December 14th, 2012, plans on going into Sandy Hook, shooting as many people as he can, and then dying. There's no law you can pass. No law. No law. If you think there is, email it to me. But see, let it soak in. See, here's a point. I'm speaking at Hillsdale College, November the 12th. And a point I'm going to make to them, I'm going to go ahead and share with you now. There's no substitute for freedom, folks. And if you're a moderate, and maybe even somewhat liberal in your political views, yet you listen to this podcast, I'm not trying to alienate you or put you down. I want you to think about it. There's no substitute for freedom. See, gun control is a substitute for freedom. Okay, instead of keeping and bearing arms, what we're going to do is we're going to say that this room is off limits. It's a gun-free zone. We're going to say that this theater is off limits. It's a gun-free zone. We're going to say that this school is off limits. It's a gun-free zone. We're going to say that this workplace is off limits. It's a gun-free zone. We're going to say that this church is off limits to the right to keep and bear arms. It's a gun-free zone. See, every time that declaration is made, What someone is actually declaring is a substitute for freedom. And how has that worked out for us? It is hard for me to remember a mass public shooting that took place at somewhere that wasn't a gun-free zone. See, there is no substitute for freedom. When you shackle the freedom of citizens, they become prey. That's it. And the predators attack because they know they're defenseless. Folks, if you do not show up and vote November 6th, if you allow the anti-gunners to take control from the pro-gunners, we are all going to be forced, we're going to be mandated to accept substitutes for freedom. And since there is no viable substitute, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adopting the posture of prey. I personally do not want to be preyed upon. I'll be voting, and I'll be voting for pro-gun candidates. Folks, we had some other news this week I thought was really, really good. A little tweet from the NRA, a tweet. But I jumped on it because it resonated with me. The NRA put out a tweet, and they said, "We, the people, will never give up our firearms." Short, simple, but profound. We, the people, will never give up our firearms. Now, I like that. It's not a threatening tweet. It's not saying we're going to use our guns to do this or that. It doesn't say anything like that. It simply says we will not give them up. I love that tweet. I love that mindset. I would encourage you to have that mindset yourself. See, we would be a different nation if our government understood that we, the people, understand that we don't have a privilege to keep and bear arms. No. We have a right to keep and bear arms. So guess what? We won't be giving up our firearms. And that includes our commonly owned semi-automatic rifles. We won't be giving those up either. Now, I haven't talked enough on this podcast about William Blackstone, the Oxford law professor, who had an impact on Thomas Jefferson that cannot be overestimated. It cannot be overestimated. William Blackstone stressed that rights that others refer to as natural rights, and natural rights are those rights enshrined in the Bill of Rights. Blackstone stressed that a better way to describe them are absolute rights. Absolute rights. Why are they absolute? Because he that gave them is absolute. Oh. Some people hate to hear this, but this was our founder's position. Remember Thomas Jefferson? How did he say we had our rights? We were endowed by our Creator. That's right. Not our Senate, not our House, not our judiciary, not our president, but our Creator. William Blackstone pressed this upon him in his writings. William Blackstone said that our rights, the rights we had yesterday, are the same rights we have today. They will still be our rights tomorrow, that they do not change because the one who gave those rights does not change. See, this is important. See, as the left shifts us away from that foundation, or tries to, as the left tries to shift us away to where we think our rights come from government, then they can make their little arguments where they go, well, the founding fathers had no idea that a Glock handgun would hold 17 rounds, so that can't be protected by the Second Amendment. The founding fathers had no idea that Daniel Defense would make such a great AR-15. So that can't be protected by the Second Amendment. The found and fought, on and on they go. See how they do it? But if you go to Blackstone, listen how easy it is. You go to Blackstone, you go, excuse me, I'm sorry. But the right I had yesterday is still the right I have today, and it will be my right tomorrow. It does not change because the source of that right does not change. It is absolute because the source of that right is absolute. I spoke to the Orange County gun owners this week. I traveled to Los Angeles, the Los Angeles area, I should say, and I spoke to them. And I made this point to them, and I make it now to you. Truth is simple. Truth is simple. See, when the left gets a hold of something, they make it ambiguous. And with the ambiguity, what they do is they can either scare you into not exercising the right, or they can trick you so that they can make you do something illegal without even knowing it, right? They love ambiguity. So when you read something and it's very confusing, and you don't see in a narrative sense or a linear sense how you go from A to B, if that's unclear, you know the left has muddied the waters. So when the left comes out and says, look, that AR-15 is not protected by the Second Amendment because our founders could not envision it. That semi-automatic shotgun by Benelli, which is phenomenal, that is not protected by the Second Amendment because our founders could not envision it. When they go down that line of thinking, our simple response is, wait, the right I had yesterday is the right I have today, and it will be the same right I have tomorrow. It does not change because the source of that right does not change. It is absolute because he who gave it is absolute. These are the words of Blackstone, but it was the mind of Jefferson. It filled his mind. So it came out in the Declaration that we are endowed by our Creator. And those who push gun control are trampling your rights. Now look, folks, I'm going to be clear here. This doesn't just apply to the Second Amendment. This applies to our speech rights outlined in the First Amendment, our religion rights outlined in the First Amendment, our rights to gather and demand of government redress, that is outlined in the First Amendment, our property rights, our rights to be treated with dignity if apprehended, different things. You know, if you read the Bill of Rights, so many rights are enumerated. And every one of those rights, every one, including those that fall under the Second Amendment, every one of them is absolute. I know Senator Chris Murphy in Connecticut hates that. Of course, he's not the brightest knife not the brightest bulb in the house anyway, so it's okay. All right. But, Senator Murphy's come right out before and said the Second Amendment is not absolute. Sorry about your luck. It is. Sorry about your luck, Senator Murphy, but it is. All right. I especially love, by the way, when the left comes out and says something like, just like the First Amendment, which isn't absolute, the Second Amendment isn't absolute. On that one, they've missed it twice. Because guess what? My speech rights are absolute too. Because my speech rights also come from my Creator. And if it bothered you that I said that, then take it up with Thomas Jefferson. And if he's not available, take it up with William Blackstone. Don't take it up with me, because I'm basically just parroting what they said, and particularly what Jefferson said at our nation's founding. Now, folks, we had a looter in Panama City who would not go down in my book as a genius. All right? Just wouldn't go down in my book as a genius. Perhaps you say, why? Well, here's why. He tried to loot a police car. By that, I mean, he tried to steal a police car. Now, it gets better. He climbed in it. It was a police SUV. The lights on it were flashing, which tells you the officer's somewhere close. He has exited the vehicle, perhaps to check the neighborhood, to walk the neighborhood, to do a welfare check on people post-Hurricane Michael. The lights are flashing. But it gets even better. There is a state fire marshal sitting in the passenger seat. So the looter climbs in the car, closes the door, and gets shot dead. I'm just telling you, folks. I think I write between about 1,900 and 2,200 stories a year for Breitbart. And every time I think I've seen it all, something like this happens. Like I think, yeah, I've about seen it all. And then someone tries to steal a police car while an armed state fire marshal is sitting in the passenger seat. It's how it is. Hey, folks, you're listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. We're going to be back with a special guest right after this.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
I said that it's the epitome of hypocrisy. Unless you fall in line with their liberal agenda, this uniparty, globalist, liberal agenda, they will never support you. They use the whole gender issue, of course, as some kind of tool to prop up their messaging, but it's the phoniest thing.
Sirius XM Patriot, Channel 125. This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is AWR Hawkins.
Hey folks, welcome back to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. Brought in a guest today at the request of Jeff Mowbray. He's just become a buddy who he tweets me all the time. He's on my Instagram. He's emailing me. I told you to start this podcast. He sent a picture of he and his father and his daughter out shooting this week, showing 3 generations of people enjoying firearms. Anyway, he asked me, he goes, why don't you get your wife on here sometime and let her talk about why she enjoys firearms. And those of you, as I say, who follow me on Instagram at AWR_Hawkins, you've seen pictures of Heidi shooting guns, or even on Twitter at AWR Hawkins, you've seen pictures of her shooting guns. So Mowbray was saying, it'd be pretty nice to hear her views on these things, how she came to enjoy firearms, so on and so forth. And guess what? I think he's right. So, folks, welcome Heidi to the podcast. Heidi, thanks for making time to be with us this morning. I do know that this is a busy day for you.
Thank you, AWR, for having me on.
Thank you. Anyway, listen, here's my question for you. Like Mowbray's saying, I kind of know, but I want you to say it in your own words. How did you come to enjoy firearms? What happened? What were your experiences as a kid or, as a girl growing up? How did, I know you grew up in West Texas, and almost when you say West Texas, people goes, boom, that's it. That explains it. But there's more to it than that. So why don't you tell us how you came to enjoy firearms?
Well, family time with my dad often involved going out and shooting cans or going hunting, and the first thing he did is he said, if you want to be able to go shoot, you've got to learn all the proper safety. And so he started me from little bitty with a BB gun, and then it was the big day when I graduated up to a 410, and then when I got my 12 gauge was a real big day. But I had to know how to do everything to be a bird dog. That was my first job, just being a bird dog. Had to go find the birds and bring them back and learn how to clean them. So we had to even take care of the animals when we shot them. But it was a big deal to learn how to shoot and be safe shooting, and how we always stayed behind the guns and where the gun's positioned so nobody's in danger. And I just grew to love the sport of shooting.
Right. You know what I remember while you're talking? I do remember shooting with your dad, of course. He had that little .22 revolver he loved to shoot, a Ruger. The Ruger single six. He loved shooting that gun. But the other thing I remember is when we first got married and you were still finishing school in Houston, at the University of Houston, people used to take you duck hunting, and I'd stay in bed. They would talk to us and go, "Hey, y'all want to go shoot some ducks?" You had your gun with you. You'd say, "I'll go shoot ducks." And you get up and go shooting. I just stay in bed. But I mean, people don't understand that you don't just talk pro gun because we're married. You love guns. You love hunting. That's what people need to understand.
I absolutely love guns and love hunting. I do. That was some of the most fun time going outside of Houston, and we usually shot mallard ducks in the Panhandle, but these were a different kind of ducks that flew a little bit faster.
Right.
So it blew my mind a little bit, but I finally picked up the lead of the duck a little bit on time and started hitting them. But woo, that was tricky.
Now, I know that you have a concealed carry permit. I happen to know that you do, and I happen to know that you keep a firearm with you just about all the time. Why don't you tell the folks what your favorite, or one of your favorite firearms is, as far as handguns go, that you can keep with you for self-defense?
Well, my absolute favorite is the Kimber Micro Carry 380. The trigger pull is so smooth. It's just so easy for me to shoot. It fits in my hand perfectly, and I just feel extremely confident with it.
Now, why don't you tell everybody how hard it is for you to deal with the fact that every time we go shooting, I'll shoot you. I'm joking. I'm joking.
That's funny.
That's funny. That's a joke, folks. Now with the long gun, I own her. But with the handgun, it is very frustrating to shoot with Heidi because, especially that little Kimber Micro, she'll take it in either 380 or 9. And ring the steel every time. Bing, 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 bing. And then I'll get up after her just to prove to her that I can also do that. And I will, without exception, miss 2 shots. So she's 8 for 8, and I am 6 for 8. And it's very frustrating. I'm trying to figure out how she does it. I think she has 2 pieces of metal in her pocket, and she's tapping them together to make it sound like she hits the target every time. So anyway, look, why don't you tell people, in your own words, of course, though, why gun ownership is important? So we know it's from your dad and family time. You learned to shoot, and then, like I said, when we first got married, you could tell that had all taken root. You used to get up and I'd stay in bed and you'd go hunting, and you carry guns now and so on. But why is it important that we have a right to keep and bear arms? I mean, explain that in your own words.
Well, I'd say one of the most important things that's happened is I've had a couple of times, I'm a runner, and where I was running early in the morning and I had a man circling me that had bad intentions, and had I not had my pistol and the ability to show that I was armed to this man, he would have kept circling me, and I'm positive he would have taken me into the back of his car. But all I had to do was raise it up and show him that I had the ability to defend myself. And he drove on and never circled back. And then I had another time.
Smart man. I just want to throw that out there. He was dumb, but he's smart for a dummy. All right, keep going.
Had another man trying to get in the back door of my car before the cars had automatic locks on them. And he had his hand on the door handle for the car and was pulling it open. And I pulled my pistol up and tapped on the window. And he sure did let go and back away. But that would have been a bad day for me had I not had my pistol.
Right. So, in other words, you're making a point that I make a lot, which is that for women, For everybody, firearms are important for protection of life and liberty. But for women, there's another thing at stake, and it's dignity, because you don't know. Maybe the man doesn't intend to kill you, but he could intend to do things to you, assault wise, that are just horrendous. And so with a firearm, you can put him in his place real quick and get him to walk the other way, which is what you did in both instances. So that's good. Now, look, let me just ask you one other question going forward. This is a little more technical, but I don't mean technical like something you can't answer, but I mean, we have Kavanaugh now, we have Trump in office. I guess what I mean is it's more political. But when you think about where we are now, and with the 5-4 vote in the Supreme Court, thanks to Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, you see Trump and how he loves the Second Amendment. What do you think about where America is right now as far as freedom goes? And to me, I always think of freedom, as you know, with firearms, because if we're armed, we're free. But in whatever you want to say, and in your own words, what do you think about where we are right now as far as freedom goes in the country?
Well, I think we're extremely blessed to have the president that we do have, who is fighting to keep our freedoms. I actually very much appreciate what you do day in and day out, fighting for our right to keep and bear arms, not bury them, bear arms. Because it really is just a God-given right that is important, and it has kept me safe. It has kept our children safe a number of times. And I know it's saved your life.
Right. You know what? That's a good point. What I'll do after this break, when we come back, Heidi will be gone. But when we come back, I'm going to tell you all a story about one time where I had 4 individuals on me, so 4 on 1. And I'll tell you what saved my life was a Taurus Model 85 38 Special. Now, I'll tell that story. But anyway, for now, Heidi, thank you for being with us and for sharing your perspective, and maybe get a little time in at the range, practice up with that handgun. No, I'm joking. I'm going to go shooting today, I think. I'm going to try to go 8 for 8 with that micro, see what we can do. But, folks, you're listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. Oh, wait. Heidi wants to say one other thing.
I did want to say, because I didn't finish that answer, that I think it is one of the greatest moves in history that Kavanaugh is now on the Supreme Court, and that will instill that we continue to have our rights. So I'm very thankful for Kavanaugh.
Yeah, I am too. I can't believe he withstood what he withstood. It's unbelievable. Folks, I'm gonna take a break. When I come back, I will tell you that self-defense story, and I have other self-defense stories to share with you from around the country. But you're listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. We'll be back right after this.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlowe.
Censorship is a key issue here, particularly for people on the right. Do you think it was addressed adequately?
Definitely not. It was useful to name check Diamond and Silk. It was useful to check even politicians who had campaign ads that were shut down. But in every case, Zuckerberg was allowed to essentially dismiss the case and move on.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is AWR Hawkins.
Welcome back to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. It was good to have Heidi talk. She's a pretty good shot with a pistol. She brought up, and I can't remember if I've ever talked about this before on the podcast, but the incident, I think I've had 2 times in my life I've had to pull a gun in self-defense. May have been 3. But one of them, which was in Texas, I had an older car, And during the Super Bowl, I pulled that car out and left it sitting in the drive. And this was a cool night, cold night actually, probably about 30, 33 degrees outside, and had the thing sitting there and warming up. It had an OV8 with a carbureted engine. So you guys remember how that works. You let it warm up, and it's just sitting there in the driveway. And I turn around, and I'm walking back toward the front door, and my German Shepherd, Betsy, one of the best dogs that ever walked this earth, by the way, she's standing up in the door, like standing up with her paws stretched out. And a German Shepherd stretched out's a pretty big animal. And just woo, 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 woo. And I can remember as the old saying goes, the hair on my neck stood up. And in a flash, I remembered a car had gone by the house really slow. And when Betsy's barking, just in my mind, I'm putting things together, and I'm thinking, whoever's in that car is coming at me. And I spun around on the porch, and I had two individuals coming at me. One of them was probably 8 foot away from me in the grass. One of them's coming up the driveway. And the other two are still near the car or in the car. But there are 4 total. And the one coming right at me, I said, stop, and he kept coming. So I flipped up my shirt and put my hand on my revolver. And I told him, I said, stop or you'll die right there. And he stopped, but he kept grinning at me, and he had his arms behind his back. And I said, tell your friend in the driveway to stop or I'm going to shoot. And I had the gun. I had my hand on the gun the whole time where he could see it. And I raised that gun. I pulled that gun from my belt, but I kept it down. I believe that's correct. I kept my hand on it. I wanted it to be visible the whole time. But he had his friend in the driveway stop. And then I said, Then I told the guy to show his hands. And I determined in my mind, if I could see his hands and there was nothing in them, I wasn't going to need to shoot him. But I had also determined in my mind at that moment, and those of you who've been in this situation, you know how you think. It's very rational. In this moment, I also thought if he shows his hands and then reaches behind his back again, I'm going to shoot him. But he raised his hands and there was nothing in them, and he held them up. And I told him, don't put your hands back down. And I said, what do you want? And he said, we just want directions. And he's still grinning at me, which is what was weird. I was nervous the whole time that there was another individual that I wasn't seeing, because this guy acted like he had the drop on me. And I said, I told him, I said, you're crazy. You're risking your life for something you could get on a cell phone. I knew he was lying, by the way. But I told him to go back to the car. I said, tell your buddy in the driveway to go back to the car. And I just, as I say, I'm holding a gun. I've never pointed it at him. But I just walked toward him, and he walks backward to the car. And we have some more exchanges. And I let him know what I was going to do to him if he, if he broke with the protocol we'd set there. And what I was going to do to him involved shooting him dead. And walked him back to the car. They jump in, and the car spins tires and leaves. The next day, I talked to one of my buddies who's a police officer, and he said, man, oh man, you don't know how lucky you are. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, they've been jumping people in that neighborhood as they go in their house. In other words, he said, these people were driving by. They saw you walking toward your front door. They were trying to get to you at the same time that you were opening that door. They were just going to jump on you, overpower you, go in the house. He said, you should have shot him. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. I was more than willing to shoot the guy if he posed a life and death threat. But once I saw his hands, I said I couldn't shoot him. Because, I wouldn't have a problem. Let me just tell you that for anyone who doubts it. If my life were in danger or Heidi's life, I wouldn't have any problem killing somebody and then eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and drinking a Mountain Dew while I waited for the police to get there. It wouldn't bother me a bit. But I don't want to shoot somebody if they don't pose a life and death threat. I just don't. And I determined that this guy was no threat to me. Now, he had me nervous because he kept grinning at me. And the way that house was built, there were certain corners someone could have been hiding behind. They could have already made it to the house. I didn't see them do it. And they could have been coming up behind me while I was talking to this guy. And I thought about that, but I trusted my dog to make more noise if they were coming. Anyway, that dog saved my life that day. It's the bottom line. That dog and that Taurus 85 38 special revolver, which I do love. I love the gun. But anyway, 2 weeks later, 1 block from our house, 2 weeks later, a car full of folks jumped a guy at his front door. Shots were fired. I never learned if the homeowner fired the shots at them or if they fired shots at him. But they overpowered him. So I'm just telling you, I think what I learned from that story, something that's never left me, is that it can happen anywhere, anytime, and you have to be ready. You think about it. I had a gun on me just going from my house to my driveway to start my car so I could warm up and walk back in. A lot of people would say, man, you're pretty paranoid to do something like that. But it was just part of my habit. It is still part of my habit. When I wake up, I grab my cell phone, my pistol or my revolver, and a knife. That's my daily habit. And that means when I walk to the mailbox, I'm armed. If I go to the driveway because I left something in my car, I'm armed. If I walk through the neighborhood just to take a walk with Brewster or with our dog Kimber, I'm armed. It's not because I'm paranoid, it's just because that's part of my daily practice, so I'm always ready. And if that hadn't been part of my practice that day in Texas, I might not only have never written for Breitbart, I might have never had this podcast. I just might not be alive. That's the bottom line. But there were 4 of them and 1 of me. And I was able to take charge of the situation because I was the one with the bullets. Folks, this story is brought to you by the Second Amendment. One other story. From this week we covered at Breitbart. We had a husband a male in their house, a renter. And I'm not sure what that means. I don't know if that means they were renting him a room, an apartment room or what, but a renter got in an argument with the man's wife and shot her. He allegedly threatened to kill her. Then he shot her. He shot her in the arm. The husband then intervenes, wrestles with the guy, manages to take his gun away, shoots him. He shoots the attacker. The attacker jumps through a window to try to escape, but he can't do it. He makes it 3 or 4 steps, falls in the yard. He's dead from the gunshot. The husband and wife are transported to a hospital in stable condition. As I say, she was shot in the arm, but both were wounded and both transported to the hospital in stable condition. The only casualty in the whole deal was the guy who started the attack. Folks, this story is brought to you by the Second Amendment. Folks, thank you for listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins this week. Get your friends, your family members, your coworkers, all your fellow gun owners, get them to subscribe. Just go to iTunes, subscribe to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. It'll download every Tuesday. It's free. And get them to go to the main page after they've listened a while and give us a review. Need all the 5-star reviews we can get. Folks, remember to vote. Remember to vote. We need to increase our pro-gun majority. That's how we have to think. Forget the blue wave. It's red wave time. We need to vote. Folks, until we're together again, always remember, more guns equal more freedom.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
I want to actually take a couple of the references to Donald Trump from hip-hop. And then we're going to try to see if we can figure out why they like Donald Trump. Jay-Z said, I'm at the Trump International. Ask for me. Raekwon said, I'm the black Trump. They are comparing themselves to what he represents. His wealth, his achievement, capitalism.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.